Must be. All righty. I'm Vaughn Parrish, and Bill evidently is detained, and he'll be along in a little bit. Maybe he had to do like we did, have to hunt this place a little bit. But I know you're all interested in caller education, or you wouldn't be in here. And I don't know what Bill had in way of presentation today, but I think we could all benefit from asking each other, what are your ideas? What do you think is the most pressing need in caller education today? Where should we start? What do you think?
Eddie Ramsey, Memphis, Tennessee. Continuing education in any profession is a essential element of going on. You can have people practicing the profession for years and years and years, and they get set in their ways, they get set in their ideas, and they don't believe something new. It doesn't exist for them. In my own profession, I'm a certified public accountant, and we are required to have 40 hours a year to maintain our license. And I compare that to this profession. This is also a profession, and I can see where we need continuing education as a mandatory situation to keep ourselves prepared and ready to go. And I believe CALLERLAB is a place to start and to have it, but the need is what I consider essential. So that's why I'm here, to see what and how we're going to do it.
Thank you, Eddie. You noticed he said to maintain the license. What did you say, 40 hours? You got to have 40 hours of schooling to maintain it. Pete, got any comments to make? Pete's still writing that up down.
Well, I may be unique as far as most of you are concerned. I am not a caller. I am a dance leader, supposedly. I'm a member of the National Executive Committee from the National Square Dance Convention, here as a guest of CALLERLAB to see what goes on as far as callers are concerned. I was general chairman of the 27th National Square Dance Convention in Oklahoma in 1978. And I am very much interested in education because my permanent assignment on the National Executive Committee is to the program of education at the National Square Dance Conventions. And our convention that is comparable to this convention is for callers. We have been dancing about 25 years at this time, and if you don't believe education is important, look at the difference in the activity as a whole 25 years ago as to what it is right now. And I attribute most of that progress to education. Most of education, most of square dance activities begin with callers. All beginning square dancers, his first contact with the activity is the caller teacher. And first impressions are most lasting impressions. The impressions that beginning dancers get from the caller teacher, their very first contact with that thing, lives with them for all of their square dance life, as far as that's concerned. So I think that caller education, especially caller teacher education, is very, very important because, as you know and I know, the most important defect that we have in the activity is our rate of dropout from beginners. This is a nationwide or worldwide problem, and I think a lot of that problem could be eliminated by education with teachers, callers. And we had a session last night. They were talking about teaching and qualifications of teachers, and I think that's part of the problem. And I think CALLERLAB can help a bunch right there. Your work cut out for you.
Thank you. Pete Hughes. Anyone else have any comments to make? If you do, step right on up here. Is this mic live here on the floor? Okay.
How do you use a mic you can't hold in your hand? Jim Hale, Houston, Texas. I'm a strong believer in caller education. I have been working with the Houston Caller Association for about 15 years in training of the new students. I think that everything, or 99% of what's wrong with square dancing today, the things we've discussed, goes right back to the abilities of the callers. Now, we have some real good caller colleges over the country which do an excellent job in the week or 2 weeks if they have the people. But there's one big hole in our caller educational program in the whole country. And this hole is at the point at which the new man wishes to enter calling. There are some lengthy books written on this. When I first started calling, I picked up a book called So You Want to Be a Caller. By the time I got to the second page, I was totally lost. This led to the development of, eventually, of a program of teaching in our area. The program we teach down here has a lot of holes in it. I know it's got holes in it because it's been a 1 or 2 or 3 man program set it up. Somewhere in CALLERLAB, of all the talent we've got here, there is talent that can help to set up a program for the beginning caller. Now, this, as I envision this, it would not be a program to in any way replace existing caller colleges. They're excellent. It would be more a program to shape this man's career in square dancing during this critical first year that he goes in. To have to get him a basic knowledge of choreography, to have to get him moving in the right attitude towards square dancing, to help develop this 90% of a caller's ability, which has nothing to do with what he actually says into that microphone when he's calling, to prepare him so that if he wanted to go to one of Vaughn's or Frank's or Cal Golden's colleges, he could receive the maximum amount of benefits from that. We have now a little sheet that has about a dozen lines on it that says suggested curriculum for caller schools. I don't think that we really have enough there for the caller talent that's available on the local level to conduct a class. I don't think we've ever addressed ourselves to how much class we should give that beginning caller, what availability we should make to him for classes. Frankly, fellas, when I went to learn to call, this has been 17 years ago, there wasn't near as much to learn as there is today. And if I had to start all over again without some kind of a school to put me through that first year, I'd never make it. As a matter of fact, knowing what I know about square dancing now, I don't think I'd even want to try to learn what there is to learn today, under any condition. But I think we need to address ourselves to the basis of the problem, because the beginning caller, as he grows from here on up, is going to eventually take the place of everybody sitting in this room, from the chairman on down. And the only way we're going to really get this square dance picture rolling is to start at the bottom foundation and build a foundation under our callers. So from there and go. It's a big program. It would be a tremendous project, a good while to do, but I know we've got the talent to do it. I think we ought to address ourselves to it.
Okay, thank you. Just a week ago Thursday, I happened to be in a city, and a day early, and I asked the guy where I was staying if he knew what was going on that night. He said, yeah, our caller's having a class tonight. And I said, let's go. You want to go to a beginner's class? I said, sure. He was surprised. He said, well, I'll go call him up. A little bit he came back and said, no, he doesn't have a beginner's class. It's a beginner caller's class. We're not interested in that. I said, I sure want to go, because what we're interested in is the grassroots. So he goes and calls back. He said, I can't imagine you wanting to go to a beginner caller's class. And so on the way, he told me that this caller that was their club caller is a good caller, but he said he's never been to a caller school, and but he's just going to teach a bunch of guys to call. We went to the place, and there was about 20 people there wanting to learn to call. That guy put on a little tape recorder onto the machine, gave each guy a record and a sheet of paper, and said, read the singing call, and they got a square on the floor. Everybody went through it, his call, and with the square dancing. When it's over, they taped all the callers, and when it's over, they played the tapes back. And he had put it on and said, well, let's move up a little bit. He got on the music over here. I know he got on better than that, and he'd hunt around, find a place where the guy was on the music for a little bit, and it was that way all through the tape. When he got through, he said, "I think we got a good bunch of callers here. Everybody did a good job for the first time." It was encouraging. He said, "How many are still in class?" There was about 6 guys held their hands in beginner's class. One held up his hand that he said, "I'm in a +1 and +2 class." He was the one person on the floor that was doing a banjo wheel when a do-si-do was called. He was doing a little patty cake on the weave the ring. He was doing a Varsuvienne promenade and all of those type things. He was the one person that was the fanciest don't follow the rule guy on the floor. And anyway, the fellow who was in charge of the class introduced me, and I talked for just a moment. And I said, "I'm glad that I could come and observe that we're interested in the grassroots program, and I believe we're at the grassroots right here." And they all agreed. They agreed. But I said, I would like to say, here's what I would expect of a caller if he's intending to pick up a microphone and become a caller. Number 1, your attitude and how you dance. Are you going to be, you'll be a leader. And if you're interested in picking up the mic and becoming a caller, I want you to be the right kind of a leader. If you're not willing to get rid of any bad habits you might have and follow the rule book when it comes to dancing, leave the microphone alone and leave it to those of us who are willing to put our neck out on the line and say, we're following CALLERLAB. This is a professional leadership. We have a book now. We can read the rules to our dancers, but first off, we must be the proper dancer, and we must lead people properly. Number 2, when you have your mind made up, you're going to do that. Mic technique, and that includes every technique you use while you're on a microphone. It includes your attitude as to, well, I guess you better square them up. Could be kind of lazy. Better square them up. If we're going to dance tonight, we might as well get started. Or you could be silly. Form your itty bitty square, and we'll call you your teeny weeny square dance. Or you could be sarcastic. Well, if you expect me to call you one, you better get up here on the floor and get in a square. I could have been watching a good TV program. Or you could be we got a couple of minutes before starting time. Come on, make a square. I want to show you a goodie. You can instill in the dancers something exciting. And you can stand up straight. You can hold a microphone properly. You can learn how to breathe, how to speak, and how to project. And you can smile with your speaking to the dancer. All of these things are part of it. All the techniques you use while you have a microphone in your hand and your stage presence is mic technique, comes under that heading. Now, once you're the proper dancer and you're using the proper techniques, what's the next thing you need? Music. So let's listen to how we choose music. Let's learn how to listen to music and learn how to find the kind of music that I would like to call to, that I think that the dancers I call to would like to dance to. Once you have that, what's next? The first thing anybody that wants to call he thinks that comes next, choreography. And under that, it's how you call it, not just what you call, but how you call it. So all of that other stuff comes last. And then if you get all these things together, you'll get the people. And I said, I think it should come in that order. So first, how do you dance? Next, proper techniques. Next, music, and then choreography. And I said, by the way, Sunday, I'm working a school or a clinic all day for new callers. We'd love to have you come down. Not one of those guys came, but the fellow who was teaching them came. And when he left, he said, man, I got a bunch of material. And he said, I've never taught any callers, but a couple of guys asked me, said, how do I learn to call? And he said, I figured, well, I might as well get them together. So he had 2 weeks telling guys, if you want to learn how to call, come over there next Thursday night. And he showed up with 20 people who would like to call. How many of you have to work a lot harder than that to find prospects for callers? It takes more than it just to kind of put out the word that we're going to get together if you want to learn how to call. And this fellow had never taught a caller. He had no idea what he was going to do. But he was willing to come out Sunday. He drove about 150 miles Sunday to come to this session to see how would I go about teaching callers. And I tried to give him what I thought he would need. I concentrated more on him that day than I did the other 6 callers that were in that session on Sunday. So I too believe that we got to be at the grassroots. But in order to do that, we have to continue our education as experienced callers and as experienced caller teachers. How many of you have conducted classes? Teaching callers. Teaching callers. Okay. What do you think is the most important thing that a caller must possess today? What rhythm? I think his leadership ability, I should have said, his ability to lead people, I think, is the most important thing, and lead them properly, by example. And have them on. Okay. Let's discuss it. Step up to the microphone and let's discuss it.
I always get into these things. Ron Nelson from Virginia, but recently transplanted to East Texas. I've attended a clinic that you taught about 16 years ago, Vaughn, and you covered pretty much the same material, I believe, at that clinic. And I, in the years that followed that, have had the opportunity to be the leader for several groups of new beginning callers, and I feel that one of the more important things to instill in someone that's interested in learning to call is to make them aware that if they're going to be a leader, that they have to lead by setting the proper example for their dancers. That you can't do this Varsuvian promenade and the flip around do-si-do or whatever other kinds of poor dancing techniques that you have. And attitude, I think, is all important in standing in front of a group of dancers and presenting the correct image to the dancers, and then also the study that's necessary to properly teach the basics so that people will be comfortable to go out and dance. And let's face it, it's proper teaching, I think, that keeps dancers in the activity. It's the poor teacher that loses the dancers for the most part. They go out and they get clobbered on the floor because they don't understand the basics. And I see it time and time again.
Many of the callers are not teaching basics properly because they're not reading the definitions, and they're not following the definitions when they have they've read them, and then they go to class and teach, and they don't follow it exactly the way it's written. But I think by the time this convention is over, we're going to have a set of definitions that's been approved. What is it, in the 13th draft now? And so you can teach by definition, and but set an example. Anybody else got any comments to make?
You asked the one thing most important to, as I understand it, to a new man that wanted to become a caller. One word described to me: commitment. If he's committed to becoming a caller, totally committed to it, and if he's going through one of my classes, he better be, because I'm going to work the devil out of him that first year. He's going to find himself taken care of through in 3 and 4 nights a week, a lot of weeks. He's going to have to be committed. If he's committed to do it, he can do it.
Thank you. Martin, he said something a while ago about dedication. Come up and talk to us, Martin.
Well, we've taught 2 groups. Martin Mallard from Saskatchewan. We've taught 2 groups. Another caller and myself in the process of teaching another one, and it's a 2-year program that we use. But what you were saying about commitment, I use the word dedication. If a caller isn't dedicated, both as a dancer and a caller, I don't think you can train him. I really don't. We have one fellow in our area, I shouldn't maybe talk about this type of thing, but he was a dancer I taught 15 years ago. He's a good dancer. He's got no problems dancing. But I wish to hell he'd never taken up calling. Because he is teaching all the things that we don't want taught, but he does not dance them. Now, if you can explain that to me, I'd like to know why. We're not using them in our area, but he goes out, guests, comes back. How do you regulate a man like that? What do you do with him? You tell him not to. We explain why. He thinks CALLERLAB is great, but he doesn't. He just, plays the game. But he has the name of a caller and doesn't play the game that we like to see. And that's a question I'd like to talk to you people about. How do you do it? What do you do with these guys? How do you get them out of the movement?
You asked everybody the question. Here comes an answer.
Not quite. I taught
Your name?
Carl Brandt from Fort Wayne. I taught a small group of fellows who had already been calling, and the first night I had them in my basement. It was very unusual. I didn't plan to start the way we did, but I threw out a question. I thought, let's do it this way. So I asked them, what do you fellows think is the most important part of the calling aspect that you're into now? Some of them are calling hoedown, and others in the beginner Western style and so forth. One guy started right out and says, well, when I get on the mic, I tell him who's boss. Show him right now. I says, that's so. Boy, right away, it turned my mind around as to what this fellow was influencing the rest of them. So I went up and got my book that I bought from Dr. Murray Banks. And if you've ever heard of him or not, he's a psychologist out of New York. He's quite a speaker. I wish we could have him here sometime. He was similar to the fellow we had the other year, but I think this guy is way ahead of him. He's a motivator, and he has in his book what people want out of life. And I think this is what a caller should recognize when he's going to entertain the people. And that's what I try to teach this guy in an indirect way, that stop that idea of saying, I'm going to show him who's boss, kind of a thing. Whereas you grab that microphone, you're an entertainer, and what do the people really want? Number one, Dr. Murray Banks says they want to be loved. They want to have a feeling of importance. They want to have a mate. And they also would like a little change. Now, sometimes we think, we shouldn't change much, keep the same old thing. But people in life would like a change, not a drastic change. So he explains all this in his books. And gee, they're only $2 for a little paper-bound book. If I showed this to the fellows, I said, all of you ought to buy that particular book. And the one fellow, Chuck Peel from Indiana, does quite a job up there now. He was with that group. And he said many times later on, doggone, he said, you started out, and I thought you were going to hand me the mic and start calling. What'd you do? He said, you start talking about handling people. I said, well, that's the whole ball game, really. You have to adjust to the group you're with, Because I have problems up there. Sometimes these guys are turning the circle left, and they say, do a left Allen man. They take the girl's right hand and flip them under. And I'm about ready to, cringe and fall on the floor. So how do you handle that guy? I have another guy that he's not tuned in on the class, but he did a few things that he listened to me. So I went over and said, Harold, by golly, you're beginning to tune in. He says, I am. Yeah, I said, you're starting to listen. Man, a beautiful job. That guy's almost double his knowledge in 2 weeks. I could have told him, you really don't belong here, but I complimented him, and I had to force myself to say, hey, why don't you get with it? But I complimented him, and his eyes lit up. I bet he'll make a good dancer. But I think that's all part of the game. And I guess that's better way to close on.
I think that's a good suggestion. This is continuing education, and I assume that it was to be about callers who are experienced callers and are teaching other callers and would like to see this program continue past the caller school stage, or whatever you would like to see. I'm sure Bill is going to want to know, what do the people in here think would be the best thing for CALLERLAB or this committee to come up with, and ideas of helping to train callers in your area, helping you to train callers in your area, or wherever you feel the need for training callers lies mostly. What can this committee come up with to help you mostly? All right.
I was considering some questions. Eddie Ramsey again, Memphis, Tennessee. I was considering some questions. First question is, where's Bill?
Well, he's bound to be busy somewhere.
Obviously. I wish we had him here because he is such a good educator. But I was thinking when I was listening to the other fellows talk, and you asked how many had taught other callers, I was thinking of where we learned to be a caller, when we learned to be a caller. Most of us, I feel, or I did, and the others, you learned to be a caller by doing it. You started out because it was the last of the folk arts. Nobody taught anybody. There was no school to go to. You went out and you tried it. You fumbled. You embarrassed yourself for 2 years, and finally you got to where you were coming close. And then after 4 more years, you got to where you were about middle size, and the next 10 years you were about to get it. And that's the way we educated ourselves in calling. There is many places to go now to continue education of a caller that's been calling for a while. There's the callers' colleges everywhere. And then I see other fellows saying, we had a few guys that we tried to teach. He said a minute ago, he said, excuse me, I forgot your name. Carl. Yes. You invited some people over to teach them how to call, and you had not done that before. So once again, we're approaching from the same way. We didn't know how to do it. We didn't have an educational procedure to go with. Nobody had trained us. Nobody trained us to start we learned how to square dance, and we started teaching other people how to square dance. Now it looks like we're going the same way with calling. We learned how to call. We've been at it a while. We have some experience, which is valuable. And we're going now to try to start teaching other people to call. Well, this is where I feel CALLERLAB can make the contribution, is to give the teachers a teaching format. We've got a dancing format now to use. We've got a definition of the dance to use. Who had definitions when they started out? Who had read the book? Who had memorized the book? Where did we learn? We learned by golly, the first. When you taught your first class of square dancers, you had learned 10 times as much as they had by teaching them. So now we need a direction, a program to teach the teachers, and I'm thinking questions here, not answers. I don't have any answers, but I'd like to have them. Where do we get the material? Where do we start? I've often thought there's lots of things I'd like to do. I'd like to have a group that demonstrates, that does nothing but go out and put on shows. But I've been looking for somebody to ask, where do I start? What do I say to these people the very first night? You're going to be good square dancers? Well, they kind of know that. Where do you start? Where do you start with caller teaching? Where do you start with any teaching? And I think the best educated person is the best person to begin teaching. But that person has to be educated first. So there's somewhere in the bottom, there's a place that we have to start from.
Let me ask you this. Do you feel that this caller education program has been too slow in CALLERLAB, or have we done the right things in the right order? And how can we continue to be a benefit to the square dance caller who's teaching callers?
So far, CALLERLAB, it seems to me, is for the caller who has called a while, a year, more, or 3 years, yeah.
Okay, but what about the caller education program?
For the caller that has been calling, the caller education program is available. For the person that wants to be a caller, I don't know about it yet.
What about the curriculum that we've set up for caller schools?
Well, I haven't been involved in a beginner caller school.
Yeah,
so.
okay. what is needed mostly in your area? Would it be, maybe I'll put it this
Very
way, would
good.
it be of a benefit if CALLERLAB would take, we have caller education specialists or caller coaches, whichever you call them, now accredited as such, examined by their peers, and hold a certificate. Would it be of benefit if all of those caller education specialists could be made available through CALLERLAB to an area to teach the callers in that area how to teach their new callers, or perhaps start a new callers class and give them an outline to follow and then turn the program over to the experienced caller teachers in that area?
Right away, you see a method and an approach. The experienced caller coach teaches the teachers how to be teachers. Because the problem, as you saw it and see it, is that the person wants to be a caller and he has no place to go.
Now what do we need for?
But
where do we need to send them?
First of all, we need to send the caller coaches to the caller area association groups, whatever makes up the area get-together. And then after that, the problem is probably in many places somebody needs to take the time, and some of you have already, to sit down with the new people and teach them to be callers. The problem that my area finds is nobody wants to take the time to do that. We're all too busy. We've all got, either they're calling 7 nights a week or 8 nights a week, or they're calling 1 or 2 nights and they have a job that keeps them busy the rest of the time, and there's just not enough time to do the thing that we enjoy, which is calling, and also do the teaching which is necessary to continue.
I have thought for years that if somehow we could get a group of callers made available, one caller here and one there and one here, or anywhere across the country, the local callers organization would get in touch with CALLERLAB and say, we would like to have a certain caller, and you can do this today. All you have to do is look in your book and call any of the guys that you know work in that field and say, when can you come into our area? We'll get a group of new callers together, and we who would like to teach the new callers in our area would like for you to show us how to teach them. We'll get them together for the first time, and you come in and spend a weekend with them and get us started off and give us ideas how to teach them. This happens in lots of places where I go. Will it happen? Would it be good in your area?
Yes, I would like to see it in my area. It hasn't happened, but I would love to see it. And we have the same problem that's been created, as Martin said before. We've got the guys who have made it up there. They've taught that class, and they've got themselves a club, and boy, we sure are embarrassed with it. They're sure. Ron, you're next. I keep nodding into the tape recorder. I hope that's on.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that what you have to say is certainly valid, but I think that we have too few caller coaches in the business today to be able to spread them all across the country to make it an effective program for each of the many, many callers associations. I think what would probably be more beneficial would be a caller coach training program for the experienced callers in the various parts of the country who can return to their respective associations and teach for their own local areas.
Let me ask you this. How many of you have observed someone that you thought was really capable of teaching callers? How many of you have just sat and observed him teaching a caller? Okay. You learned from that, didn't you? I have. Every time I watch a caller working with another caller, I learn from it. When we learn from something, we try to put that to practice. That's part of my continuing education for myself. Observe the others.
I try to attend a caller school on frequent occasions. I've been to 4 different caller schools in addition to innumerable clinics over the past 17, 18 years that I've been calling. But I've never had a course laid out for me as just to how to go about teaching a group of callers. I think a handbook or some guideline for someone that wants to teach callers, perhaps is in order here.
All right, next.
I'm Frank Keyser from Belleville, Illinois. CALLERLAB, you know, second year, I believe, that they were in existence, put out probably 2 pages of a suggested curriculum for colleges, teaching callers. I'm sure that John Kaltenthaler would make this available to you. Our Illinois State Callers Association, every year, Vaughn has conducted an institute forum, but every year we have an institute with a caller.
Martin Mallard again. As a longtime member of CALLERLAB, one of the things that has confused me and concerned me considerably is the term caller coach accreditation. Bill Peters and I had quite a set-to in my room last year about this. I asked him quite point blank, what are the requirements to obtain caller coach accreditation? And I have been a member of CALLERLAB since its inception and have attended every convention. And I have yet to see in writing what is required of a caller coach to attain accreditation in the eyes of CALLERLAB, other than accreditation by his peers, paying a large sum of money to be accredited, and nobody knows what they have to study beforehand. I mean, we don't know, myself, I don't know what fields I have to be competent in the eyes of CALLERLAB to be a qualified caller coach. So I'm going out and teaching callers in our area, doing what I think is right, but I don't think that I'm doing it right in the eyes of CALLERLAB because I do not know fully to become an accredited caller coach what are the requirements. Vaughn, you used the term accredited caller coach in the eyes of CALLERLAB. I asked the question, what is an accredited caller coach in the eyes of CALLERLAB?
Okay, first, the curriculum for caller school was set up. Then we started in the beginning, we started to search who has been teaching callers. And everybody that they could point to that said, yes, I've been teaching callers, or those who have been doing caller schools or clinics and things, were invited to make up a set of test questions to send in. All those test questions were put together, and everybody answered the questions. Then we all got together and went through the list of questions, and we found out that there were so many of those questions that there was disagreement on, and we'd take maybe question number 1, everybody agreed it was a legitimate question. Number 2, one man would say, now I have so-and-so about that question. There could be 2 or 3 different answers. We discussed it for 30 minutes. Then we go to number 3, and maybe it was okay. And number 4, we had to discuss it for 30 minutes, and the first thing we knew, we were going to run out of time. So I said, we better go through this list of questions if we're ever going to get anything done. Anytime anybody has a question about the question that has been answered, raise the hand, and we'll push that to one side, and we'll find out how many questions we all agree on that's legitimate. When we got through, we had a set of questions that everybody agreed was good questions for this exam to be taken from. They said, okay, we'll start giving that to anybody who would like to take the examination. In addition to this, at least 3 callers have to get together, and one caller is going to sit on the carpet, and the other 2 are going to fire questions at him for a minimum of, I forgot the number of hours, 6, 8, or 10 hours. And it's, to begin with, I thought, why do you got to sit across the table and ask him questions for a minimum of 6 or 8 hours to find out whether you think everything is in the right place for him to go out and teach callers? I found out after the first examination. Cal Golden and I examined the first one. I found out after everything's sailing fine up until about 4 hours, and then all of a sudden we hit something in about 30 seconds. We found out that program, we were trying to find those who had done it, and we're going to recognize those who had been teaching callers. The same as when all of us, when we came in, decided we must be an accredited caller in order to stay in. You are all accredited callers now if you've been in more than, what have we got, 3 years to become accredited by our peers as a caller? Okay, so we decided we were just recognizing all those who are callers. CALLERLAB is not here to teach people to be callers. It's here to recognize those who are callers and find out what our needs are in square dancing. So is the Caller Education Specialist certificate or the Caller Coach certificate. That is not to teach a person how to become a caller trainer or caller teacher or a caller coach or a caller education specialist. It's just to recognize those who have already done it and demonstrate their expertise in teaching callers. That's all it was for. So others applied and went through the same examination that we had been through, paid the same amount of money as we had paid, and others have failed and others have passed, and others have appealed the decision of the examiners and have gained some kind of I wish Bill were here to clarify this. He is the chairman of the committee, and I've worked with it a lot, and I've worked with teaching callers, and I'm one of the accredited education specialists. I have a certificate hanging on the wall. I didn't ask for it, but I did pay my money for it because it seemed that I was expected to, and I felt that I should do it. I felt I had an obligation to do it for this organization. And I feel that if any of you would like to become an accredited caller education specialist or caller coach, just write to John Kaltenthaler and ask him what are the requirements. He'll tell you, and run with it. I don't feel like that. I never did feel like that we should limit the time. A person must have been calling 10 years, and I've heard people say, well, I don't know why he's got to call 10 years before he could get that certificate. Well, what do you want to do? Lower the standards? See, now, I'm not asking anybody individually. I'm asking me this question. What do we want to do? Lower the standards? No, we've gotten so far. Let's keep them there. Let's work to get everybody in that would like to be recognized as such. Fine. That's the best I can answer your question about what do I have to do to be one. I don't know if I've answered one or not. Okay, I haven't answered. Come on. I want to understand. What is it that you don't understand?
The thing that I'm confused with, this man over here is a CPA. Before he became a CPA, he had a curriculum that was set up by whatever school he went to. He knew what he was going to study. Now, as callers, a lot of us are versatile in certain areas, and we know we're lacking in certain areas. And the areas that we're lacking in, I would like to know what I have to fill in. How much history do we have to know of square dancing, for instance? There are a lot of callers today that don't know the history of square dancing. You mentioned the name Pappy Shaw, they don't know who that is. Seriously, I'm talking about this. Now, how much of this do these new callers have to know, or the guys that are going to be training caller coaches? How much knowledge of sight do they need? How much knowledge of contour do they need? How much knowledge of quadrille do they need? The Caucasian circle dances, this type of thing. How much of all of these fields that are part of our movement do we have to know as a caller coach? Strictly speaking, the answer I got from Bill was everything. Well, that's a pretty broad spectrum, and this is what I'm saying. Is there a description of what we need as a caller coach, the tools that we should familiarize ourselves with? In other words, I'm teaching callers to call, but am I teaching a broad enough spectrum to these fellows to continue the movement?
Here's what happened to us as we were taking the... Don't sit down for just a minute. As we were taking the exam, every one of us said, holy cow. And we thought, hey, this is a tough test. And when we talked to each other later, man, that's a tough one. We got to thinking, is it too tough? And then after we thought about it for a while, one caller, for certain Frank Lane, to be specific, he said, I finally decided it's not tough enough. We need to get tough with the guy that's going to teach the other callers. And so I should have flunked more of them. I should. Oh, gosh. One, a lot of them that we threw out. What I was told was the answer: 1 mil. Okay, huh? Or a 3 mil? Here's a man that knows the answer. That was one of the questions that was tossed out because we said, who needs to know that? We know where we can get another needle when it happens. Well, there were questions about. There were choreographical questions. There's a question about everything that the callers who have been teaching callers could think of to ask. Now, the idea was that anyone who's been teaching callers and doing it for a good while will come up with a passing grade on this. And none of us knew how to make up a test and give a test except get all the guys that were interested in it to put the questions together and then take the test ourselves and then go over it and see what we thought about the test. And a whole bunch of questions were thrown out that we didn't agree on, but we did keep in the questions that we do. Yes.
I'm still Dan McCornack from Eugene, Oregon. And I think we have probably two different questions. I have the same question that Martin has. How do you become an accredited caller coach? Certainly, I'm not at that plateau myself. We have a different problem in our area. There are several of us that cannot afford to attend a caller's college. The guy who's picking up a mic for the first time doesn't feel like he can afford to spend the bucks that it takes to go to a caller's college. Still, he wants to try this thing. We have a demand for help in our area. We do not have an accredited caller's coach. Our association, these requests come to our Callers Association. So they pick a person with the largest, reddest nose, and they say, hey, do you have time to do this? And I say, I'm not qualified to do this, but I'll do the very best I can. I'm a member of CALLERLAB. I send letters to CALLERLAB, and I get a sheet of paper that has 10 different areas that we should cover. And I think this is an excellent start. It's also an excellent start that I'm making. I'm following that curriculum to the best of my ability. But I don't feel that I have the guidance at this level that I should have. I believe that you could offer us more guidance in teaching at the level. Then we're going to encourage these people. And I say that the very first thing I do is find out if these people can dance. If they can't dance, obviously they can't call. And that's why I mentioned earlier, and in all sincerity, the most important thing that I can find out about that potential caller candidate, does he have a sense of rhythm? And if he doesn't, he'd better drop the whole thing right there before he ever starts. I find he has that. If he has the interest, if he can spend 14 hours a week working at this, if he has a sense of rhythm, if he has some sense of tone, if he has a definite interest, I can't keep him from learning to call. He'll learn to call in spite of me. Then I can encourage him. Hey, you got potential. Why don't you go to Bond School? But I think
in defense of Bill's school.
All right, to Bill's school.
He couldn't be here.
But I believe that we should have more guidance for those of us who are one step down the ladder, as well as an idea of how we become accredited caller coaches.
The thing that we started in the beginning is say that CALLERLAB is not going into competition among its own members. So this caller education program is not going into to running caller schools, because there's lots of us who are running caller schools, and but we would like to have your ideas on what can this committee do to help caller education in your area, and if there's some way. Do I understand that you think there should be a book that if you study that book, that then you are assured that you're going to pass the examination to be a coach? microphone. He said they need resource materials. Okay, he said we need resource materials. Okay, next.
John Smith from England. We have a slight problem in that we're a long way away from everything that's happening. And I would love to come to one of your caller schools, but it's just out of the question financially. And Pete Skiffins came over a couple of years back and looked into the accredited caller coach system and found that he couldn't even manage to go in for the examination. But at the same time, he is doing a very good job in being the caller director of the Callers Club of Great Britain in helping to teach callers, newer callers, to teach. And certainly the idea of a handbook or guidelines would be a tremendous help to us because we're so far away.
Thank you.
I know you love to see me come back up here. Now, the thing I want to address is a couple of little things brought up here. One is this caller coach thing they talked about. I don't think it belongs in this committee. I don't really care because the way the program is set up, being certified as a caller coach means absolutely nothing to me.
Okay, what are you looking for here today?
And therefore, I'm going to continue to teach whether I'm certified or not. In fact, I've never applied. It's never interested me. So what I'm looking for now is the places that, back to the basic thing we started to begin with, is that we need direction on the local level because although I've been teaching these callers for 15 years, I realize there's a lot of holes in the program that we've developed over this length of time. I'm sure there are other programs developed all over the country that the people who develop these programs could possibly set up a subcommittee under you, the people who are teaching on the local level, and work out a rounded program that could be presented to the entire population. The way you did on the selection of caller coaches, why can't the people who are here, or the people who are involved in CALLERLAB, who have worked out a program, whether it be a 6-month program, a year program, or a 2-year program, as we heard, why can't we commit those people to work on a local training program to try to pool our information that we've gained over the years, at the same time coordinate with your professionals, your full-time professionals, who have been running the advanced level caller schools, to get feedback from them into this program. Now, I think that we've approached caller training all these years in the wrong way. We have caller colleges, but we don't have any caller elementary schools and no caller grade schools and no caller high schools.
The first
and
year,
I can't believe, Bob and Vaughn and I are good friends, have been for years. I steal a lot of his techniques from him, from listening to him. In fact, every once in a while I still have him calling him dogs, Bob, not Vaughn. But this has got to be the approach we use on the thing. Somehow or another, CALLERLAB has got to address itself to the needs of the beginning caller, to the people who are now instructing these callers, and attempt to upgrade the beginning program, because I cannot believe that you hadn't rather have a man that had a year's good training behind him come to a caller school that you're handling than to take a brand new man that walks in off the street and gives you his money, whatever it happens to be, and said, I want to become a caller, so you take him for the first week. Am I right?
No, you got to be a dancer first. The first year, how many of you were at the first CALLERLAB convention? I was asked to be chairman of the CALLERLAB liaison committee with callers associations. I said that the first thing we needed to do is find out how CALLERLAB could help the local caller association. I immediately sat down and wrote letters to callers associations around the world and received a response from a large percentage. I was amazed at the replies we got back. One of the questions is, what can CALLERLAB do to help your association? And I suggested lots of things, and I said, check off the things you think are most important, and if it's not on there, add some more things that we can do. The one thing that I suggested was, could we, as CALLERLAB, plan a program for your caller association to follow throughout the year each month when you have a caller meeting, could we suggest a program that your Callers Association could following your business meeting as a program to make it beneficial to your own callers, and how to teach your callers and your association to teach the new callers every year. Many Callers Associations have a program for new callers each year, and it says in the Denver area, if anybody wants to become a caller, they pretty well now, the dancers or any caller will say, if you're interested, the training will come through our Callers Association. In the beginning, it was like many probably still are now. If there's a guy available on a certain Sunday afternoon, he'll take it that Sunday. If who else is available for the next Sunday, he'll take it. Are you available for the next Sunday? He'll take it. And they might get the cart before the horse. One guy's teaching choreography before the next guy. 2 weeks later, the next guy gets up there and teaches them how to hold a microphone. We need to get that all coordinated and get it right. Next. That was the thing that was reported the first year, the first CALLERLAB convention, during the first committee meetings, and right after that went out the questionnaires. And I still have the answers on the questionnaires. But I don't know I don't know what kind of a program that Bill had to present to you today. I'm sure it would have been something you would have liked. And I'm sorry you didn't hear. Go ahead.
Yeah, Bo Semeth from Illinois. I'm an educator by profession, a teacher. And to get a degree there, you got to go through all this. You have certain courses you must take to get your degree. And without those courses, you can't get your degree, whether you're proficiency or have to actually take them. And I think to be a caller coach, I think somebody got to have some kind of a definite setup that you have to have something in choreography, you have to have something in timing and whatever, and then get your exam along with it. If you have a definite thing that say these are what you have to have to get your accreditation, I think that'd be helpful. Then they give the callers that want to coach a chance to know exactly what they need. Along with that, you probably need like a manual. But you need a couple different manuals. One for the caller coach that's working with how to teach callers, not how to call, definitely. There's a big difference there between that. When you give your kids a book, they've got one book, and you as a teacher have another book that has the answers. And that's what your caller coaches needed. Basically a book that's got how to call and how to teach them how to call. You need a manual there with all your different topics, whether it be choreography, as a teacher coach, not how to teach a first-year caller, how to teach a 10-year caller. There's a big difference there. How to present things. There's a lot of things I think that caller coaches, I think they've got the knowledge to put that together. And how you guys could do it real well without any trouble, I'm sure. But you need a manual like that. You also need a manual for the local level that you can send to organizations and say, here's a basic program for 1 year on how to teach callers for your organization. And perhaps have a callers teaching college for those that want to teach callers at some time during the year, like a weekend or a whole week long, and put this material out to them and give them their manuals to take back as references. I think that way will help them a lot more than just trying to do it on your own. They got something they can always refer back to if they forget or check something out. Thank you.
Okay. How many of you have sat down and written out what you would like to see come from this committee to help caller education, or help your callers teach the new callers, or whatever you think the most important thing this committee can do for square dance activity? How many of you have sat down, written it down on a piece of paper, and sent it to Bill Peters? Do that, will you? Oh, it's yeah, okay. If you don't, anything you have to say, if you don't know who to send it to John Kay, and he will get it to the proper people. So if you have an idea, that's what it's about. Send it to the executive secretary, and he'll get it to the proper people. That's all you have to, he'll put you in touch with the right person. Next.
Bob Stoops, Indiana. I think not only are we're basically thinking in terms of caller schools and caller colleges where someone comes for a period of maybe a week. I think maybe we could think in terms of something that would be longer lasting than that. Not only maybe a manual, but possibly teaching tapes where you could have experts in a particular field, such as, say, Jim Mayo on breathing, or someone else for microphone techniques, or Cal Golden for how you present material as an MC, something that these people could have in their own possession that, hey, we've got a festival coming up next week. I need to review what we do as an MC, that they can take a tape out and put it on the tape recorder, and they can have it right there at their hands rather than having to wait till the caller's workshop next summer or something along that line.
How many of you plan to attend the voice session at 10:40 today? Okay. Jim Mayo is excellent on that, and he's done it at CALLERLAB. Jim Mayo learned it from somebody else. I think his voice coach was the same one that taught the coach of John F. Kennedy. Don't quote me on that. But anyway, if you go there, you will learn it from a reliable person, and you will put that to work when you go to teach other callers. Who's next?
Nobody else will take it. I got something else to say. You asked how many had bothered to write a minute ago, and we talked about the caller coach program. I had, until recently, no desire to become a certified caller coach, because it's not going to change anything for me, whether I do or not.
Well,
I have no desire.
Whatever you would like to happen.
I have no desire
what would CALLERLAB do for you?
To serve on a staff of a caller college, which would probably be a good prerequisite. That would be your caller coach. But I've been told by at least 3 members of this committee that if I wanted to get the real input into this committee and get any work done on it, that I'd better get certified as caller coach at this meeting. I think that we need input on this committee, but I think the input, and I think we need people on this committee who can work on the local level, who are involved on the local level, along with the certified caller coaches, to address this local problem.
All I'm asking you to do is write down what you think we need and send it to this committee, and maybe Bill might have had a program like that planned for today. He might have had a program for you to talk about and accept. But
and maybe they'll let us listen to us.
Let me ask you all this. Is it the opinion of this group that we need to work at the grassroots level? How many agree with that?
That's what we're here for.
Okay. Now, how many agree that that is the most important part of caller training, the grassroots level? Okay. I think that's a clear majority. How many of you have other ideas that you would like to hear expressed here today? Bud? I want to hear somebody talk that we haven't heard. There's a bunch of guys sitting around here haven't opened your mouth. Yeah. And you're thinking something. I want to hear from you. And I'm sure Bill wants to hear from you, and he'll hear this tape.
I'm Bud Welch from Springfield, Illinois. I've heard many comments here today, and I hear one back here that I don't quite understand, and that is that you don't give a hoot whether you're accredited or not. I keep thinking in my mind why I'm here to begin with, how I got here. And if we're talking about a profession, I keep hearing callers, this is a profession. If you take educated, I heard a school teacher talk. I heard a CPA talk. I'm associated with an architectural firm. That's a profession. In order for me to get a license as an architect, I have to know history. I have to know history. That's part of the examination. I have to know design. I have to know structural. I have to know many phases or facets of the profession. I go to take an examination. These are phases or exams that I take. I can take in all the exam. I can take sections of the exam. But in a final analysis, I get a certificate. Okay? What I was here for today was to see what kind of educational program is developing or about to develop. I became a caller or a member of CALLERLAB by being able to call by someone putting my name in as a member or someone they thought would be a good member for CALLERLAB. But I couldn't be here unless I was calling. I have done some phase or some facet of an educational program. I teach square dancing, I teach round dancing, I teach clogging, and a bunch of other things, but I'm really not necessarily the best qualified in any one of those categories, so I'm here to learn for myself. But I want to take an examination. I want to go through an examination. I want to take a field in this mic. I want to take a field examination in choreography. I want to take an examination of timing, rhythm. I want these things developed in stages or in phases, and I want to be able to be examined and achieve that in an educational program. Did I make myself clear? Okay. I want to be an accredited caller. It really makes a damn to me whether I am or not. If I'm going to teach, or if I'm going to teach people to dance. I heard Martin say, what do we do with the guy that goes out to teach square dancing who doesn't really abide by all our ideals? I'll put ideals in there instead of regulations. What the hell are you going to do with him? We got one in our area that teaches everything contrary to what's right, but he is a showman, perhaps. Maybe that's the correct word for it. Anyhow, he has a following, but he lives in one town and never calls there. But he teaches in other towns, and they accept him and like him, and they're enthused about it because they kick, hoop, and holler, and it makes so damn much noise you can't hardly hear yourself calling. But that's what they like. Now, are we here as callers to do what they like, or are we here as callers to say, no, you got to do it our way? I think there is an area there that you're going to have to give a little bit and go one way or another. If we are going to be salesmen, showmen, we're going to have to somehow or other overcome that problem that he's talking about, not ourselves, but to inject it into the dancers that really isn't what they need. We got to show them something better than that, and that's our job. Education is going to give us that.
You know, I had a fellow told me that came out to the parish ranch a couple of summers ago, and I guess I have a reputation for saying, if you're coming there, we expect you to dance properly. And the guy, after he'd been there a week or so, he said, back at home, and I'm not going to say where it is, said, our caller said, you better get all that stuff out of your system before you better have all the fun you can before you get to parish ranch, because when you get there, Vaughn Parish ain't going to put up with that crap. Now, I resent them. I appreciate what he meant by that, but I resent the way he worded it. You better have all the fun you can, because when you get there, you ain't going to put up with that crap. Well, he had a ball when he was there. I didn't have to put up with any crap. I am proud of the reputation that I expect people to do properly. Dancers should expect the caller to call properly, but the caller expects the dancer to dance properly. And Pete Hughes here is one who knows that there are plenty of dancers that are in a leadership position who are leading them down the wrong road, right opposite to what the callers are teaching. And we need better leadership, and we need it amongst the leaders and the dancers, too. Go ahead.
I'm Craig Abercrombie from Portland, Oregon, and I'm kind of in a different phase that we're talking about mostly new callers, and we do need a lot of help in that area. We don't have any in our area. Our problem we find in the past, and maybe this is where the guy comes in that is doing his own thing with the dancers, is that I've tried to teach 2 or 3, and maybe they'd go through a year program, and we'd have an accredited, or not accredited, a caller-trainer thing where they would be apprenticed with you for, say, a year. We found this never worked because the guy says, well, I ain't going to do what you're going to do, and he would never take your criticism. So he goes out, and maybe in the past he has been successful, like you're saying, with these guys. But now we're finding that the dancers are maybe we're educating a little bit more that these guys' crowds are now on the downswing and ours are up on the upswing. My calling has changed 180 degrees in the last 4 years. And in Oregon, we found we don't have any caller trainers like Dan says. And our local associations were doing nothing at all to help. It was a waste to go to Sunday caller meetings. You sat there and you told a dirty joke or two, or you listened to new records, and that was it. I went up to Colorado to Frank Lane's, and he kind of got me in the right direction. The next thing that I knew, some people around home were, I kind of opened my eyes to some guys that were doing some good work, like Darrell Clendon and some of them, because I got up there to Colorado and I listened to these guys that, they live next to Jerry Haig and Vaughn Parrish, and hey, they're going over at these guys' house, and I thought, Craig, you're stupid. You got good callers in your own area. Why don't you go sit in on their things? So I do like Vaughn. By golly, I go out to beginner's class, and I got my notebook with me, and I sit down, and there'd be some guy in the class. Oh, you doing your schoolwork? Yep, I'm doing my schoolwork. He doesn't know what I'm doing, but I'm out there watching. I'll go to a guy's dance, or if I got an off night, I'm not at home very much because I'm going to learn. Because when you get busier, you find that you can't do it, whether it's a class or a dance or whatever. But I never could find any education for myself, and there really, even today, there isn't a whole lot, I guess, other than just get out. Voice, you mentioned. I just started 6 months ago in voice lessons. In 2 years, I just said, no, I'm not going to do that. But a gal came to a meeting, give a voice lesson, and Darrell was studying with her. And so I just started, in the last, just 3 months or so, the comments that some of the dancers are saying and things that I know I can do with my voice. There's so much that we don't even know that's right here scratching at us if we just do them. Heck, I've even been on vacation and sneaked up to Wallowa Lake and heard about something and sneak in there, and this guy says, hey, come on over tomorrow. We'll have a session. 2 of us showed up, and it didn't cost me anything, but gosh, I got a lot of good stuff out of it. I thank you for that.
Also, before he goes ahead, if there's anything you would like to say in this meeting today, say it, because Bill's going to get a copy of that tape. He's wanting some ideas, I'm sure. I'm sure he had a good program. And I do want to be sure to mention the fact that I think Bill Peters has done a terrific job as chairman of the Caller Education Committee for CALLERLAB, and he's a hard worker, and that's the way he gets things done, is work hard. So if there's anything you'd like to suggest to Bill and this committee, or that you would like to be said today that hadn't been said, for goodness sakes, get up there and say it, okay?
Hello, Bill. This is Ron Nelson from Texas again. And we've had, one of the interesting things about this session, we've had several people talk about the various professions that they're in. We have a CPA here and a professional educator. My own profession is in professional sales, and I consider myself a salesman for square dancing. And I think when a guy that's learning to call goes out and does a poor job of selling square dancing, we lose those dancers and they'll never come back again. And until CALLERLAB addresses the issue of teaching someone to teach the dancers, and that comes through us teaching the callers to teach the dancers, until we address this problem, we're not going to solve the dropout problem that we have in square dancing today. That's my comment.
Let me suggest that every one of how many of you belong to a callers association? Let me suggest that every one of you go back home, take our definitions book, and make your callers association go through each basic and have one person step out on the floor and teach each basic and make that a program for the next X number of meetings. Maybe you'd take 5 basics per meeting. But have everyone watch how a person teaches a basic and discuss it so that you all know how each other are teaching. I have found that when I can go through that basic list with a group of callers, and I've done this at every caller school, and I find when we get through that the callers who have been calling for 10 years or something like that will say, I never heard it explained that way before. They really hadn't read the definition. How many of you have read every definition in the book that we have now? You all got it in your packet. You've read them all. How many of them do you agree with? I mean, how many of you agree with all of them, the way they are? How many of you have attended that definitions meeting and said what you think about it? Not one agreed, but not one has attended that definitions meeting. How many what? How many will vote for the list as it is? How many will vote for the list as it is? Okay, how many will? Okay, all right. Because we accept the decisions of the people who have been working on it. That's the thing that I feel that I'll go along with anything that a group of thinking, working callers come up with because they think it's right. But I despise losing something because it was just an accident. Pete?
You asked a question a while ago, Vaughn, about suggestions of what this committee might do or what CALLERLAB could do to help the caller situation. I am not a caller, but I am interested in leaders, and callers are leaders by profession. And I think that CALLERLAB could help from the beginning. I think they let beginning callers flounder too long before any direction is given to them. I think you, CALLERLAB, with your educational program, do not reach beginning callers early enough in their calling life to be as much benefit as they could be. You let a caller go along, and he has to be a caller before you become interested in him. I think you should be interested in him when he becomes interested in being a caller, and therefore you can only reach him through the local organizations or either dancer organizations or caller organizations. There is a lot of dancer organizations around our country who get requests from beginning dancers or newer dancers who say, I'd like to become a caller, who have no way of knowing other than just to pick up a mic or go borrow somebody's records and say, I'm going to become a caller. There is where you really need to get to that person from that point, rather than wait till he flounders around for a couple of years.
And we who are teaching callers are trying our best. That's the reason I went a week ago Thursday, and then I invited them to come Sunday. I didn't get them. I got the guy that's going to teach them. I would have liked to have had them, too, but I didn't get them.
So this is what I think in your continuing educational program is to reach the members of CALLERLAB who are in these organizations and try to motivate them to teach the beginning caller.
The time's up, I think. Thank you all. You tell Bill we missed him, will you?